This is my preliminary winter forecast for the winter of 2024 to 2025. We will start off by discussing all of the factors playing into this winter season. The most major factor is the La Nina that is expected this year. It occurs when waters in the central and east-central equatorial Pacific cool below average. This pattern usually results in warmer and drier conditions in the south and colder and wetter conditions in the north. This is the most impactful towards our weather patterns, both in the USA and across the globe, and especially affects wintertime patterns. Another factor is the potential for stratospheric warming over the North Pole. A sudden stratospheric warming is a significant disruption of the stratospheric polar vortex. The winds of the polar vortex can weaken so much during these events that they can reverse from being westerly to easterly. This leads to cold air descending and warming rapidly. In simpler terms, warm temperatures settle in the North Pole and Arctic air is pushed southward into Canada and America. This could play a major role in who sees frigid temperatures and could also set the stage for prime major snowstorm conditions for many, if it happens, of course. The final main factor will be the Arctic oscillation pattern over the Northern Hemisphere. The Arctic oscillation, sometimes referred to as AO, is an atmospheric circulation pattern over the mid to high latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere. During the winter, the North American weather patterns are significantly affected by the AO. When there is a positive AO, the jet stream is stronger and Arctic air is contained well to the north. However, when there is a negative AO, things get really interesting. The jet stream becomes weaker, creating a wavy pattern in the jet stream in which Arctic air pushes south and warm air pushes north, creating jet stream ridges. In short, positive AO leads to warmer and calmer weather and negative AO leads to colder and turbulent weather. Now it is time to present my preliminary forecast. These are my temperature, precipitation, and overall forecast maps for this winter season. With my temperature map up first, I have the southwest, parts of the south central, and parts of the southeast under warmer than average temperatures. During a La Nina, the temperatures will tend to be warmer across the southern half of the country. That is what we are expecting this year, so temperatures will be influenced heavily by this pattern. It will also be much drier, but we will get to that later on. Our second shade of warmer than average temperatures covers much of the deep southwest, as well as the Texas-Mexico border and coastal areas along the Gulf of Mexico. Here you can expect stronger and more intense warmth than the previous areas. This area will likely be warmer than average for most of the season and possibly the entire season. That is about as intense as the heat will get, and I currently do not predict the heat becoming any more intense. Moving our focus to the north, our first shade of below-average temperatures cover much of the northwest, north-central, and Ohio Valley regions. La Nina does also have an influence over this forecast, but other factors like the AO and the polar vortex are influencing it as well. This is quite a large area that covers many populated regions, and I'm sure that this gets many winter lovers excited, and rightfully so. The one takeaway from this is that the cold will not be consistent all season. There will likely be Arctic blasts followed by a brief warm-up, and this cycle will repeat throughout the season over and over again. Our second shade of below-average temperatures cover the north-central and Ohio Valley regions, as well as a small area over Washington state. These areas could see more intense cold than previous areas and possibly longer duration cold as well. The most likely place to see long-duration cold is the area over Washington state, as cloudy, wet, and/or snowy conditions will be prevalent over the area for most of the season. Unlike the zone over Washington state, the larger zone will likely see the same cycle as mentioned earlier but have colder temperatures than the other spots. Our third and final shade of below-average temperatures cover the most northern half of the north-central United States. This area will see the most intense cold out of anywhere in the country. Just like the previous shades, the same cycle mentioned earlier will be what causes the cold, but this area will see very cold temperatures compared to the other previous areas mentioned. Given the fact that this zone is already frigid during wintertime, this prediction would mean dangerous and long-lasting temperatures, which could cause hypothermia and frostbite if exposed for too long without proper clothing. Any areas in between these shades of orange and blue should see average temperatures. This does not mean that these areas are immune to cold snaps or warm-ups, so do not think that you will just have a completely normal year if you live anywhere in this zone. For my precipitation map, I have the parts of the southwest, south-central, and southeast under my first shade of drier than average conditions. La Nina is the main reason why this is expected, as it typically brings drier weather to the southern half of the country. Usually drier weather leads to less cloud cover, which leads to more daytime heating, which leads to warmer temperatures. This is what I also predicted for these areas, so expect warmer and drier conditions overall. Our second shade of drier than average weather covers parts of the southwest and southeast regions, as well as the coastal areas of the south-central region. In these areas, you can expect even drier conditions than the previous areas, as the storm track will not favor this area whatsoever. These areas may experience prolonged dry spells that are unusual, even for these deep southern areas that may be used to it. Our third and final shade of drier than average weather covers the lower southwest region. This is where the most dry conditions are expected, and this is unfortunately in an area that has already experienced many dry winters. You can expect very minimal rainfall throughout the season, which will lead to drought conditions settling over this area for the majority of the season. Unfortunately, this is setting up to be like 2 years ago, which was one of the driest winters in recorded history for this area. Now we take our attention north once again. Our first shade of wetter than average weather covers much of the northwest, some of the north central, and the entire Ohio Valley and northeast areas. Here you can expect more storms that could bring a variety of precipitation types. What is influencing these wetter conditions? You guessed it, La Nina is once again the influence behind it, as it typically brings wetter conditions to the northwest and Ohio Valley. Although La Ninas don't typically bring too much extra precipitation to the northeast, other slight changes are expected this year which allow the northeast to be included in this section. Our second shade of wetter than average weather covers the more interior sections of the same locations as the first shade. Here you can expect even wetter conditions than the previous areas, as the storm tracks will be more favorable. These wetter conditions may be more consistent and more heavy in these areas. The combination of these wetter than average conditions and the cold air that is expected to be in place at times will likely result in above average snowfall for many people. This could be especially significant around the Ohio Valley, interior northeast, and north central areas, where major snowstorms could set up if conditions allow. Even low-terrain areas along the northwest like Seattle and places on the northeast coast like D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston could be impacted significantly in terms of snowfall this winter season if everything sets up right. We will talk more about this later in the video and in detail when I release an official snowfall forecast. Our third shade of wetter than average weather covers a small area of Washington state in the northwest. Because of La Nina, frequent storms rolling in from the Pacific will cause very frequent and rather intense precipitation to fall for a lot of the season. Though people in this area are generally used to it, it may be more excessive than normal years, which could make for a rather depressing winter vibe for the lower terrains. The positive about this is that the ski season will likely be tremendous this year, likely the best in 5 to 8 years. And though I did state that the lower terrains would be depressing, the chances for above-average snowfall are significantly higher because of the colder temperatures expected. This does not mean it will snow every time a storm comes through, but it likely will snow more frequently than in past years. Anywhere in between these shades of orange and green should see around average precipitation. Now it is time for everyone's favorite map, the overall forecast map. Starting off with our gray section, you should probably see considerably snowy conditions based off the combination of colder temperature and well above average precipitation. Ski season should be excellent this year and snowfall amounts will likely be above average for everyone, including the lower terrains. For our green section, stormy conditions are expected. Temperatures won't be as cold, but above average precipitation will still be prevalent, so only mountain snow is expected here. Still, mountain snow will likely run above average, but likely no snow for the lower elevations around here. For our orange section, dry conditions are expected. Because this area is on the average to slightly above average line for temperatures and below average for precipitation, we only needed one word to describe this section. Rain will still fall in these areas though, but your rain chances drop off significantly as you move further west. For our brown section, warm and dry conditions are expected. This section is just the more intense version of the orange section, as these areas will see decently above average temperatures and well below average precipitation. Once again, Rain can still fall, but the chances are even lower than the orange section, and they still drop off as you go west. These areas are also too far south to receive any major cold blasts, so that will keep temperatures mild all season. For our light blue section, cold and snowy conditions are expected. The southern flank of this section will likely see only mountain snow, but everywhere else should see plenty of snow given the colder temperatures and above-average precipitation. The northern flank of this section will be favorable for blizzards this year given the northern storm tracks that are expected. For our dark blue section, strong Arctic blasts are expected. This area will feel the polar vortex at its full extent, and that is why well below average temperatures are expected. Precipitation should remain around average, but decent snow and potential blizzards are still at play, as they are every year for these areas. As many people of these areas know, the polar vortex can bring historically cold temperatures, so this area will likely be in a deep freeze all season. For our blue section, Arctic blasts are expected. This section is the same as the dark blue section, but less severe. In this section, you will still feel the Arctic blasts, but not as strong as the other section. Storm systems around here are also more likely to bring mixed precipitation instead of all snow. In the pink section, this is where the winter battle zone is expected. This is our hardest area to forecast, as this area is in the average for temperature and precipitation. Here you can expect temperature swings, wet and dry spells, and all types of winter precipitation during any given storm. Any type of winter weather is on the table. For our teal section, big snows are certainly a possibility. Given the above-average precipitation and below-average temperatures, as well as the track some of the storms could take, this area has the potential to see some big snowstorms. It is not a guarantee, though, but at least expect some Arctic blasts and more precipitation in this area. For our purple section, snowstorms are expected. Though it has been lacking for a few years now, the Northerners know that this is the Northeast special right here, especially during a La Nina year. We should see plenty of snow chances in this area, and this should hopefully make snow lovers happy finally. Lastly, for our red section, the worst of winter is expected. This means that given the well below average temperatures and well above average precipitation, the worst overall winter conditions out of the entire country are expected here. Here you can expect very frequent and large storms, which will likely bring very heavy snowfall. Lake effect snow will also be very active this year, and a big year with big snow totals is expected for all the lakes, especially along Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Additionally, departing storms will probably crank up some pretty strong winds for many places in this area. Let me know in the comments how you guys think this winter will pan out, and feel free to ask me any questions. I will try to get through as many questions as possible. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe for more updates.